November the 3rd, and time for the Radnor Planning Commission meeting. We'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is the minutes of the August 5th, 2019 meeting. So we're at the point of the agenda for Megan for the minutes. Are there any changes, additions, corrections to the minutes?
I move we accept the minutes presented. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let the record reflect that the minutes of the August 5th meeting have been accepted. Next on the agenda is 155 King of Prussia Road. Excuse me, application 2019 S07 financial subdivision.
Good evening. I'm George Brosman. I'm representing the applicant. With me is Mike Kissinger from Panoni and Joe Trainer from Brandywine. I hadn't been involved with this previously, but I'm somewhat familiar with it. This is a project that you had made recommendations of approval for preliminary and final land development for previously, and those were both granted by the Board of Commissioners. In the PLO ordinance, it's specifically permitted in the zoning ordinance to have what's called a financial subdivision. And basically what that means is that the land development plan that you approved, recommended for approval previously, and that has been approved, all of that is staying the same. All of the improvements are staying all the same. The conditions are staying the same. We are just seeking approval to create financial subdivision parcels within the lot to allow potential sale of those. So we have some review letters. There's only a couple points in there. I think they're will complies. A couple had to do with some discrepancies in the legal descriptions for these parcels, very minor discrepancies. And the second was pointing out that in the ordinance it requires that there be easements created so that the parcels functions together. I believe some of those were already done, and I was speaking with Mr. Norsini earlier. We understand that we would have to provide that information to the township and the township solicitor's office, and we would expect that there would be a condition that we would have to provide those, and they would have to be approved by the solicitor's office.
Well, I'll come right to the point. When I read all this over, I thought that the deficiencies are not that minor, and I'd like some of the members of the commission to give their thoughts and ideas about that. I must say that I know that on occasion, when something's missing and we've let it go because it will be picked up by the staff at a later point in time, usually before a grading permit is issued. But this seems rather significant to me, and I'm interested in hearing from the other members of the panel, of the commission.
Well, I agree with you. There was a subdivision of land on Conestoga Road a few months back, and that plan was inaccurate. It was, and we asked that they return a month later to present an accurate plan. And I'm not sure. I just find that when I read a letter from our township engineers and it says these things are missing, I'm not sure why we accept the plan. Why aren't they just turned back and say, would you please add these things to the plan? And so
You want me to answer that, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay. So when we get a set of plans, at that point in time, we haven't reviewed it. They're submitted, so we don't know that there's these deficiencies, as you noted. We review the said set of plans, provide the comment letter to our applicant. So from a staff I understand your concern with these, but in reality, this is my personal thought, these are more, this is why we review it. These are typos and errors. It's not like their survey is all off. So yes, are they incorrect and need to be corrected? Absolutely. This is something I would recommend to this commission, and you may toss my recommendation. Whatever your decision is on this plan, we would just require the applicant to correct these items. And like I say, these are surveying typos. These are typos that occurred, and I can let Mr. Kissinger explain. I will say staff's biggest, one thing we wanted to make sure this commission understood, and it's in that zoning paragraph, and I won't go through what Mr. Brosman had said, but the applicant is required to provide the deeds conveying separate lots, covenants, etc., at all times to operate and maintain such lots in good order. So that's so the continuity of the subdivision stays intact. The biggest part of it is the purchaser of any such lots shall execute and file with the township a written covenant agreeing to the foregoing conditions prior to the purchasing. So that depending on what this commission does, the next step is the consultant has to clear up these surveying items, and then their solicitor would provide to our solicitor and staff that covenant.
Will this come back before us again then?
That, sir, would depend on how you, my recommendation to this commission, and again, you may take it or leave it, my recommendation would be to approve with the following conditions: that the survey items are all corrected and those plans submitted back to staff, and that the covenant is provided to the township solicitor and meets his requirements. So
How about I think Amy in her memo points out that easements are not reflected within the
With the 19,
subdivisions as they're supposed to be, as I understand it. Is that correct?
And yes, and I think that goes back to the covenant. So in that covenant, they're going to have to reference the various cross easements, any other easement, and these are items that would get all cleaned up. It's your option if this commission wishes to have these all addressed and have this applicant back before you. Absolutely, that's one of your options, or you can go the other way. It's your call.
I have a question. I guess what we're asking is, this seems to be a somewhat ongoing situation. Is it something that staff is okay with? Or should we take the stand in all present and future endeavors or appeals that come in front of us, okay, that we request them to do that and come back? What do you suggest? Is it double work for you because you've done it once and now you got to go back and do it again and recheck it? Or there's the fact that we stipulate that it's, it should be done in order for it to be approved by us?
So, Mr. Falcone, it's no extra work for us. This is what we do. So I don't want you to ever take that into consideration. This is what we do, is go through that. So from that standpoint, that's not an issue whatsoever. If you wish us, we're going to review this again no matter what, whether it comes back before you or whether you move it forward, because it's not going to get through. If this was approved with or without conditions by this planning commission, the next step is caucus at the Board of Commissioners meeting. There's no decision made at caucus, and these things again would be addressed. When it goes back for final, all these items have to be addressed. The engineering re-reviews it, and the solicitor would re-review everything, and all this would be cleaned up. So it's really a matter of what you folks wish to do. From my standpoint, as your engineer, I think these are cleanup items. I don't think they're anything big. You could very easily approve with the following conditions: that they meet all these. When they are ready and get that done, they can go before the board, or they can go while they're being cleaned up. But the surveying items, so from being like an old war horse, I've seen these before. I know what our planning commissioner is saying about having these addressed. But again, yes, it was a little sloppy on their part, absolutely, but that's why we're here to catch these things. Okay?
Could I show you on the plan what we're talking about? These are so minor. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Comments in Roger's letter. He has comments 2 and 3 are really the same. It's just a typo on one, what I call a meet and bound, whether the word east or west was there.
Right.
So you could show that, Mike?
So today it says south, same dimension east, and all it will say is south, same dimension west. The letter E will change to a W. It's literally as clerical as it gets. And that's comments 2 and 3 are the same line.
So
in both
just for the
descriptions.
record, you're pointing to the plan. You're telling us the plan is correct and the legal description, the meets and bounds, is wrong.
No, what I said is I'm going to change that E to a W. Either way, I'm going to fix it, but the point is that it's not a dimensional change. It's a southeast and southwest, or.
I
sorry.
understand that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to understand is which is incorrect, the plan or the legal description?
There is no legal description.
Or the meets and bounds, the meets and bounds.
So there is no legal description. This was a review of what's shown on the plan. So it's not a comparison between a legal description of the lot versus what is on there. Our folks just caught the fact that it's running one way and not the other.
It should be west. It should be southwest instead of southeast.
So it's changing the E to a W. The distance is the same, the direction is the same. And then there's comment 4. So that's the 2 comments are the one line, and comment 4 is just another line that it's obviously a typographical error. So the information was there. It was just a clerical typographical error. So those will be corrected. And then on the easements, as I said, that'll be addressed with the solicitor, and the ordinance provision in question. Actually, it says that at the time, it says in section 6, it says, provided the deeds conveying the such separate lots contain covenants requiring the purchasers to at all times operate and maintain such lots in good order and repair, to
Right.
clean and
George.
sanitary cross easements. So that's not even until the time of the deeds that's technically required. What we're saying is we'll provide that ahead of time to the satisfaction of the township and the township solicitor's office. And it's all the same plan that was approved before.
That's fine. But, the point is that it becomes a matter of degree after a while. I mean, we're all human, everybody makes mistakes. How many mistakes and what level the mistakes are before it becomes necessary to reject something like this? I mean, we're sort of on the edge about this. When I came in here, I'm thinking, you got professional engineers doing this work. It's clearly spelled out here what's supposed to be on the plans. They're not right. And Charlie raised a good point. What kind of burden does that place back on our folks? Steve has very nicely said, no, it's what we do, and that's fine. We understand that, but it's still there. That's why there's more than just one of us sitting up here. So
Sure.
that's, but we understand your position.
Thank you.
Any other comment from the commission?
I think, George, I think what we're saying as a body or a group or a commission or whatever you want to call us is, at what point do we say, this is what the ordinance says, this is what is expected, where do we stop passing little problems and say everything that's not right to a certain degree, we send back and have it done right? And then the word gets out that that next time Panonis come in here, they'll know that they're going to check it twice, because if they don't and it's a mistake, they're going to have to go back and do it again. I think that's kind of where our stand is when do we take our feet out of the sand and put it in cement?
I understand, and you have to decide that, but I've done this for many years, and these are very, very minor. It's basically 2 meets and bounds on a plan that have a typographical error on them. There's nothing changing in the substance. It shouldn't have happened. It was basically a typographical error. I can't say it should have happened, but these are the type of things that are customarily passed on with a, a will comply. This is nothing affecting the substance of the plan. So I would ask that you recommend approval with conditions that we will comply with these things. But I understand what you're saying. I know you have other applicants that come before you, but I would submit that these are very minor and very technical and not going to change the substance of anything.
I guess that was my thought when I read through this too. I think the case that we had a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago was actually a situation where it was a subdivision of land, and we had neighbors here, and it was unclear the size of that parcel, and there were errors that would have had ramifications on the actual subdivision. And so here, I recommend approval based on what appears to be more minor errors. But I do agree that we need to take into account at which point we're making that determination, whether these errors are minor enough to get a will comply or whether they really do affect the outcome of what we're recommending. So,
Anyone else?
The easement issue would have been a bigger issue for me if you had to have it now as opposed to when you do the deed. I think that's something that we sort of ought to be looking at. That isn't our skill set. But that being said, I don't see how we ever get to look at it if you don't do it until you do the deed. So it makes me wonder if it shouldn't be automatically required as part of your financial subdivision plan.
Yeah, it's just reading what it said in the ordinance, and but we will be providing it. It's essentially going to be reciprocal easements for everything you saw in the plan that you recommended approval for that was approved. You know, the driveways and the trails and the parking and the things like that.
And, you know, now that you mention it, I would have to say that we haven't actually reviewed a lot of easements. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, I think this financial subdivision, this might be one of the only places in the ordinance that appears in the PLO. He's with us.
No, sir.
Yeah, I move we accept the final, is it the final subdivision? Is that what this is? As long as it meets all the stipulations that the staff has reviewed and will be reviewed again by, okay. But again, and I kind of agree, these are minor, but at some point, you know, we have to decide what's no longer minor and what is minor. You know, and again, this isn't really this is a specific kind of craziness within the PLO. So you kind of don't have a whole lot of movement, I don't believe.
Okay, I think if you would make a motion, I think you should reference the pages of Karen Fleming write-up on page 2 specifically, and then also Gilmore and Associates zoning comments on zoning comment number 3 on page 2 as well.
May I suggest approved with conditions that all engineering comments on the Gilmore and Gannett Fleming review letters are met?
That's perfect. Yeah, say that.
Just cover, just for Mr. Lord,
Whoever's taking the minutes, that's it.
that would be me.
I move what he said.
I
a
second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That seems to be unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for your time. Personally, I apologize for those mistakes.
And again, it's kind of like, you know, we're trying to minimize the problems. And you're here a lot, so now you know.
And
So now
you're-
you know that next time, you know, it's like, you know, you can lie once, the second time you're in
Well,
trouble.
the other thing,
And you're the only one here.
I don't want to spend time on stuff like that.
Listen, that's right, we figured.
It's kind of boring, you
We're on
know?
the over now.
I mean, no, I want the professional people to do what they do, and, you know.
Good night, George. Hey, you've dropped your pen. Come back and visit us more often.
Okay, well, the next thing on the agenda is under old business. Well, we did public comment, didn't we?
Yeah, public comment for that.
Oh, it's under a separate heading, isn't it? Okay, public comment is next. Does anybody have any public comment? No surprise there. Under old business. Yeah, it's like the wedding feast at Cana. You're going to go out and find somebody, okay? Under old business, discussion of the proposed lighting ordinance and noise ordinances. And my recollection was that that wasn't going to be taking place now because we were going to get some information and so on.
So, yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll sometime between now and the next meeting, our solicitor, from what I took from the last meeting was lighting is in different ordinances in the township code. So we're going to pull together for you basically everywhere where it mentions lighting. And then it was also discussed, do you leave the various sections where they are and adjust them? Or do you create a new lighting ordinance and everything all the other pieces are taken out of the code and you now have one lighting ordinance that everything refers back to? Because you have lighting and zoning and you have lighting and saldo. So we'll pull that information together through the solicitor, provide that to you, and then you can determine, you know, some schedule that you wish. You just let Trish or myself know we want it on X meeting, and we'll have it on that meeting. That was my recollection of
Yes,
the meeting.
that's correct. I'm speaking for myself, I would like some analysis in that submission that discusses the experience of perhaps some of the other townships around here that are similar to us, not necessarily townships that are much more rural, but ones that are similar. I think there's plenty of examples of that. To see what routes they've taken and also how it's worked out for them, if possible, to know that. And some pros and cons on which may be the best way to go. And whether we integrate the lighting into the existing ordinance, or we take it out and create a whole separate. What are the risks and benefits of doing that? And I think that that would help, will help educate us on this topic and make it a much more effective discussion. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
John,
Yes.
just along those lines, I mean, that's getting closer to what I recall, but I didn't recall that we were going to get the entire, pieces of the code just dumped on us again. I thought the last time we discussed this, it was going to be presented to us with some type of analysis of, here's a proposal for changing, because I believe as we're sitting here, we don't have necessarily the motivation, or not the motivation, but the, what's that? The expertise, and also, coming to the table that X, Y, and Z is what needs to be changed. I mean, we were sitting here in a more neutral position with someone else advocating that maybe something needs to be changed, but without them telling us what that would be.
Well, I think that maybe I didn't express it clearly enough, but I was thinking that's really something that would happen here, is that we would have some things laid out and explained, the pros, the cons, whether is it cleaner, easier from an enforcement standpoint to have it blended into the existing ordinances? Is it better to take it off and have it standing alone? And what are the pros and cons of doing that? I think we need some professional guidance on that. It's not necessarily something we're going to know in and of itself.
That part I agree with, but I think we had moved away from the idea of creating an entire new lighting ordinance to go back to the piecemeal approach. But when you go to the piecemeal, here's a section and here's something that could be changed. Here's a recommendation and why. because the way we're sitting here, we don't have any of that to begin with.
So if I may, so what we'll supply to you, provide to you at the next meeting, again, is everywhere in our code that lighting is mentioned. And I'm saying this here as our solicitor is going to dig all that up for us and provide that. Mary and her firm, very well versed in this. My recommendation or suggestion to this commission is the next meeting, we provide that information to you and staff, and when I say staff, that's the consultants, that's our solicitor, myself, go through these basically line by line saying, here's what you have, this is the consequence of this, here's what you have, this is what this enforces, and then get your feedback, because I don't want us to write drafts for you folks without you telling us what you want in the draft, right? That's the planning commission's, we're not here to direct you, you are here to direct us. So we could do that. We do use a lighting professional, FX Engineering. They reviewed the Villanova project for us 2 different times. They're very well versed. They know our ordinance. So at one point, if you want to draw in a technical review outside of Gilmore and or Gannett, we would go to FX Engineering and have them review it and come back with their comments. And they're familiar with lighting ordinances from several areas, but I agree with Mr. Lord. We don't want it from East Vincent, and there's nothing wrong with East Vincent, but it's a little more bucolic in Chester County. But what does Haverford do? What does Lower Merion do? What does Tredyffrin do? These are our surrounding communities or other communities on the edge of Philadelphia, the suburban Philadelphia communities. That might have been, so Mr. Golis did a huge amount of work, and he drew some conclusions himself. So there were several ordinances, there was our ordinance. Give us a chance in the next month to try to put something together with what Mr. Golis provided, with what our solicitors find when they go through our ordinance. We'll come up with something, we'll meet, and hopefully put something in a format that you folks can digest and we can discuss, and then you can tell us whether, as Mr. Vine said, do you wish to just adjust lines where they sit in zoning or saldo, or do you wish to create that standalone ordinance, and what are the consequences of that?
What he did is the ones he looks like he did is Upper Merion, Swarthmore, Lower Merion, which are very similar to us.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we already have that in this memorandum that you gave us, I guess, last month?
That was last month. But we haven't given you all the code lines of ours that you need to see
Right.
in one specific area. And we will do that.
I think the information that I was missing last time too, that I found hard to understand, is kind of 2 pieces. The first is enforcement, and when these ordinances come up for review. So if everything in our ordinance is design review, I think that's an issue, or at least it isn't addressing the problems that we're getting from the public. So understanding at which point there's the possibility for enforcement on this would be great. And if it does come back as all design review, well, maybe that's a starting point for us to say, okay, what do we do if we have lighting that once it's approved, the as-built is different than what was designed?
And we have that ability
We
now,
do?
right?
Okay.
So we actually did that with the Villanova University, the West End parking lot. So the design on paper met what our requirements are, which are really basically no spillover on the property line. Some of the residents were concerned that there was. So we brought FX Engineering
Right.
out, 8:30 at night, myself, him, the township manager, Bob Zinkowski, I think a commissioner or 2, and a bunch of people. And we went from house to house to house with a light meter. And he did determine that it did comply. So there are ways to do that, but maybe then our solicitor's office can help us with. So enforcement, you have to comply with the plans, right? If the plans are approved, you have to comply. I think your enforcement's going to come in more on something that's not a new subdivision, and that's what you folks have to address. Mr. Falcone's lights shine in my window, and it really bothers me. Is there enforcement against him? How does that work? And that's on the residential side, which you folks I know were concerned about. So there's a lot to discuss, I think.
So some of the enforcement stuff, I'm dealing with one of these in Lower Providence Township, actually. And it's not necessarily a brand-new plan. It is your situation where somebody went from incandescent bulbs to LED bulbs, and he changed the trajectory. He wasn't going to probably need to come to the planning commission to do that, but now his lights it's a car lot, and it's shining on every neighbor's house. It feels like a prison yard. So, but we have him on an enforcement matter right now where the township's expert went out, measured, and said, you know, basically your engineer needs to come up with a plan to fix this. We're not trying to harass you and make you tear down all of these lights, but you need to come up with a way to fix the problem that we're having. I mean, you know, that is still not to a conclusion, but the bottom line is that we're taking him to court, and it could ultimately end in an injunction, ordering him to take the lights down if we have to, but
Okay.
trying to find alternatives, but.
Yeah, I think having that information, to me, is really important, knowing when certain things can be enforced, both on the commercial and on the residential side. What's in place now is a good starting point. And then the other piece of information that I think would be so helpful, and I don't know how we would collect this, is actually to go, is to survey the Board of Commissioners and say, over the past 2 years, what have the issues been in the township that people have raised? What are the complaints? And so instead of just approaching somebody else's ordinance, we can say, these are the problems that we have in this township, this is the control we have, and if we're going to make changes, it should be directed specifically at some of the things that have been issues for the past couple of years. Because I think updating the whole thing is too broad for us.
Yeah, I don't think you need to pull the whole, there's really only one commission you have to pull.
Oh.
You know, the other way of getting that information might be, is there a log of complaints of some kind? Or a way to,
I'd have to check Mr. Kunda, because those complaints could go anywhere in the township. So it could go to the police, and then there could be an incident report. It might go to ComDev. It might have gone to Public Works. So I don't know. We'll do our best to pull together at least police reports and anything else we can get.
I mean, are police reports like March 2019, and then there's just a file with, 50 or 100 or whatever, or is it broken out by topic a little?
That I don't know. So I will ask the police if there are incident reports on lighting over the last X years.
I know it may be a little low tech, but even just sending out a poll to the Board of Commissioners and just saying it's not to identify specific issues. It is to say what have been issues. Has it been commercial properties, residential properties, and what type of fixtures are we looking at? No identifying information.
There's an old saying, if the dog's asleep in the corner, don't kick him.
Okay.
Anything further? Anything further?
So, Mr. Lord, myself and our solicitor's office and staff will meet. We're going to come up with something as best we can for this commission to at least get you started for the next meeting. And at one point, we can bring in our lighting expert, however we want to do that. But we'll try to get something that you can digest for the next meeting.
Very good. Thank you. Now, any new business? Doesn't look like there's any new business. Will somebody move to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Don't need a second adjournment.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.